isn't about accolade. It's about resilience, the kind that forged through challenge and the kind that speaks to every young man, young woman wrestling with self-doubt, to every parent to guide their child back to the right path, and every community leader who still believes in second chances. So pull up a chair, take a deep breath, and listen close, because what you're about to hear could change the way you see leadership, the way you see legacy, and the limitless potential that lives right here in South Georgia have. Captain Cochran, thank you for being here with us. As you know, I'm B. Keith Jones. For our audience, I'm B. Keith Jones, and this is...
I'm Captain Lamb with the Pelham Police Department.
We're so excited to have you here, sir. Is there anything you want to say before we get started?
I just want to say I am very glad to be here. And it is a pleasure and honor to have an opportunity to share my thoughts about my journey and some of the lessons learned that I think apply to all of us, whether you're growing up in a big city or whether you're in a small town like Pelham. I think those values and qualities that are rooted in success are basic, and it apply to everyone. And so I'm excited about the opportunity to share in my journey. And we'll over to you, Keith, and Captain. Looking forward to having a conversation with you as well, because I've had a number of opportunities to share my thoughts with police departments up in Atlanta, down here in Florida, where I currently live. And looking forward to coming to my hometown and perhaps sharing a few thoughts with you guys.
Thank you for that, sir. And you know, we talk about this. In the beginning, I want to talk about origins and overcoming adversities that we deal with from week to week and day to day. One thing that I shared with our group last week, or our audience last week, is the fact that in Georgia and nationally, in Georgia, 10%, the Pathways to Assistance study in Georgia found that 10% of families account for over 50% of the violent crime in Georgia. Nationally, 6 to 8% of families account for the violent crimes in the United States. And so that tells us that the issue that we're dealing with is legacy, adversity, and things of that nature that's kind of built into everything we do. And so I want to ask you, Captain Cochran, take us back to your early years. And obviously, you know, I know your family well. You was a little bit older than me, so I didn't know you as well. I went to school with your sister and brother. But when I look at what you have accomplished, take us back to your early years in Pelham. What does that look like? Kind of give us a picture. What lessons did you carry with you from this community into the Navy?
Well, first of all, I'm sure you're going to ask a lot of good questions, and that very first one is a very good one. There were two primary influences in my life, my early life. The first was the family values and family. And the second one was growing up on a farm. I realize now that I was very, very fortunate to have a family unit, because a lot of families today don't necessarily have a family unit, but I was fortunate enough to have mom and dad, and I had there were 12 kids. There were 9 boys and three girls. And my parents firmly believe in the Bible, which says, raise up a child, and when he is old, he will not stray from it. Well, they had 12 of us, and they had to have some type of structure in order to basically instill those necessary values necessary for all of us to be successful. They were very, very strict when it came down to saying yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, and being respectful to your elders. Just the fundamental values of respect, honesty, all those core values that make an individual strong. Now, you don't necessarily have to have a mom and dad teach you that. You know, either parent can teach you that. So that's the good news. The other thing that was important was they instilled in us those core values, and we went to church. You know, a lot of times I didn't necessarily want to go to church, but as I look back at my my life, I think it was one of those things that encouraged me to develop my skills. For instance, speaking. We had to do speeches at church, which I didn't like at the time, but that's necessary to learn how to speak in front of people, learn how to memorize. I learned so many things about just just getting along with other people by being in the family unit. And the other influencer was the farm. I had some really good, let's say, fundamental skills that I learned on the farm that have aided my journey in every aspect of my leadership development. I learned motivation, I learned dedication, I learned all those things by getting up in the morning, going to the okra fields and harvesting okra, harvesting all sorts of vegetables. My dad believed in keeping us busy, so we would work in the summer 6 days a week. We had Sundays off to go to church, and I missed a lot of cartoons by having to work Saturday morning. But my first 6 months in the Navy, I thought I was on vacation. I was like, hey, when did the work is going to start? So my parents did a couple of things. One is those core values were critical, and they applied whether I was at Savannah State, the Navy, Coca-Cola, UPS. Those core values were universal values and allowed me to go anywhere from Pelham and go in and be involved in these different organizations that were very high performing organizations and be able to assimilate without losing who I was as a person. And so my parents did a wonderful job, and the farming environment gave me that work ethics necessary for you to be successful in anything you decide to do.
Okay, thank you. And that's very profound, what you say, and how that everything you did in the farming from the baseline, your baseline is farming, and as far as learning your work ethic and things like that, and family and the church.
Let me add this part. I have gone full circle because I have a farm now back in Pelham. So I was there yesterday. I was there yesterday. I have and this shows you how a lot of people will go away from Pelham and then they will come back. And reason for that, some people stay all their lives, but some of us will leave, get some skills, get some financial support, and come back because we recognize the unique opportunity that exists here in South Georgia. A lot of people want land. They want to live in this part of the world, but we live here. So we got to take advantage of the opportunities that are here by developing the skills. There's plenty of good jobs here, but you got to have the skill set necessary to make it happen. And as an example, not to get out of control here, but I have a tractor, and if I need it repaired, then I got to have a skilled technician to do it. I have a cooler that requires refrigerant. I got to have a skilled employee that knows HVAC, how to service and make those happen. So all those type things are out there and available, and but you have to have the skills necessary to be able to, not only the skills to do the job, but the ability to go and assimilate and work in that environment as well.
Okay, you're exactly right about that. That makes a lot of sense what you just said. And you're talking about having all of that. So when you're basically saying when you have to do something, you have to have the tools that you need to get it accomplished. In terms of that, what kind of obstacles, personal or professional or societal, did you have to face on your path to becoming the first African American pilot in the Blue Angels history? And how did you overcome?
Well, let me revert back to my parents. One of the things that I learned as I look back at how mom and dad raised us, we grew up in the 60s and 70s, and the attitudes in the South during this time frame, especially during the civil rights movement and all of that. One of the things my dad did on the farming environment, we worked on the farm, but primarily we worked for ourselves. There were times when we worked for the local farmers in the areas, but we didn't necessarily have to. And what that did for us, it shielded us from a lot of the issues that a lot of African Americans faced during the South. Now, that's not to say that I haven't experienced discrimination or felt unease. I have. I think all of us have at some point have felt those type issues. And so the good news for in the early stages of my life, I saw those things, but I had minimal impact on me in terms of the discrimination I felt. Now, as I joined the Navy, initially, the challenges that I faced there were subtle type discriminations, things that happens, wondering why you were left out or why you didn't get the same information as others did. Those things happen. The good news for me is there were times that I experienced blatant discrimination, in my opinion. And at the same time, there were people that didn't look like me that wanted to help. So what you have to learn is you're going to have people that don't necessarily want to see you succeed. And on the other hand, you're going to have other people that are willing to take a chance on you. There is absolutely no way I would have been selected as a Blue Angel pilot if there were people that didn't want me to be a part of the team. And at the same time, there were some folks that didn't necessarily feel that way. So what I had to do was, number one, develop that overwhelming confidence in my ability to succeed. Now, you may say, well, if you're in a hostile environment, you can't necessarily develop that overwhelming confidence. That is true. But what you can do is make sure that you show up every day with what I call an ACE attitude. And what that means, attitude, character, and enthusiasm. Meaning I had to have a positive and engaging attitude. And that means that I had to have the ability to change tough situations into something better. Then I had to have a character that was second to none. In other words, my most effective means of persuasion and influence was my character. And much more deeper than that was stuff such as I had to walk my talk. I had to be reliable. I had to be fair in what I did. I had to be disciplined. I had to show up on time with a good attitude, all those things. And the other aspect of it was ACE, attitude, character, and the last was enthusiasm. I had to show up with positive enthusiasm for what I wanted to do. So those type elements or character traits allowed you to go into a hostile environment and change the dynamic, all based on that attitude combined with exceptional performance. It's impossible to have exceptional performance in an environment that doesn't make you feel welcome. But you can make a difference in terms of what you do to control the environment that you have control over. You can't control a lot of people, what they're going to say, what they're going to do, but you can influence them through your performance. The other key is sustain superior performance. And what that means is you can't just show up today and have a good attitude, tomorrow you're bad. Or 2 weeks you're good and the next week you're bad. It's sustained superior performance that changes minds. And you have to have the ability to sustain it despite the issues that are coming up against you.
I tell you, I sit here, I can listen to you talk about that all day, because everything that you hitting is things that even I can use in my personal situations and in my professional walk. That's very powerful what you just said, and it makes me consider this. when you talk about the things that's required for you to stay on top, basically at the top of your game, so to speak, we're talking about resilience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what when you dealt with moments of failure and doubt, how did it shape your sense of resilience?
Okay. Well, as you know, resilience is having the ability, despite having difficulties or setback, to keep that momentum. And that momentum is sustained by that ace that I talked about earlier, that attitude, that character, that enthusiasm, those things. So the resiliency piece for me revolves around establishing some core beliefs. For instance, on the air show, when I was flying with the Blues, especially my first year, after every flight, we had a debrief. And as a newbie, when you were learning, there were many opportunities for you to make some mistakes. One of the things that I said to myself when I was selected as a first African American pilot, I didn't want to make no mistakes. I got to be perfect. Well, I realized real quickly that that was impossible. Everyone made mistakes, and I was no exception of it. So I learned some fundamental things about making mistakes and overcoming them. The first thing was I learned, despite my best efforts, I was not perfect. I made mistakes, and that's okay as long as you're able to sustain excellence. That is the key. You're gonna make mistakes. You have to put them behind you. Okay, so here is the difference between a high achiever and a, let's say, a average performer is their ability to handle setbacks and failure. And there's a quote that I love, and it says, "Your positive and engaging attitude is the only means of converting your failures and setbacks into assets or benefits." Now, isn't that powerful? I mean, you can't change the outcome of what happened, but how you move forward and
Yeah.
your attitude can make a world of difference in terms of your ability to move forward. And so that's one of those quotes that's critical for resiliency. The other things I learned was about um, learning learning how to accept feedback and criticism, without without taking it personally. So for
Right.
me, when we had that debrief, that was the first one. Learning how to accept criticism and feedback without taking it personally. Sometime, the second thing I learned, sometime your feedback comes camouflaged with resentment, hurt feelings, and even agendas. You have to
Uh,
have the you have to have the ability to sift through all that and take ownership for the mistake that you need to take ownership for. And then the last thing I learned was sometimes you get feedback that's not credible. And it's your job to just ignore that because that has no impact on you. Sometimes you could be in school and the teacher say, well, uh, she would say, we need to make sure that you show up on time and you have your homework done and all this stuff. Well, if you have your homework on time and you show up on time, that doesn't apply to you. That applies to those folks that don't do it. So you have to
mm,
have the ability to discern what you need to take ownership and work on and what you need to let go.
yeah, I'm going to take that myself, and I'm going to convey that to my students because a lot of times you're directing them, and the whole class thinks you're talking to them when you really not. You got to be careful how you convey it, I'm sure, but that makes a lot of sense what you just said. When you talk about what your accomplishments were, and one thing is you talked about that stress that you had on you, just being the first African American Blue Angel. I can't imagine the weight of that. I mean, in the nation, and the weight of that, having that on your shoulders. I remember when it happened. I think I was in college then, and I remember reading it in Jet magazine. If it wasn't then, but I know I showed everybody I could show in college. We were proud of who Donnie Cochran, where he came from. Donnie Cochran, our hometown guy, and that there's a lot that goes along with that. And when you look at that, it's the power of representation, is what it is, right? It's a responsibility of representation. What did it mean for you and the people of Pelham, you think, to see somebody who looked like them flying with one of the most outstanding and elite um, aviation units in the world? In the world, not just in the country.
Well, I think the first thing that anybody should be thinking, especially a young person, is you can go anywhere you want from Pelham. That's the first thought I would say. The next thing is when I was selected to the team, I had this elation, this exhilaration, feeling of excitement, followed immediately by, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? It's a mixed emotional achievement.
Right.
You don't have very much time to celebrate because you realize that, okay, now I have to go out and do the work. And what I learned was it was a big elephant. But as you know, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And
Right.
so my task from being selected was, okay, I have to learn how to fly an airplane 36 inches wing tip to canopy, in some cases 18 inches apart, doing 360 miles an hour. Okay, I got to learn how to do that. Well, it doesn't happen overnight. So that ace that I talked about earlier was critical to show up every day, giving myself the best opportunity to crush it so that it was a building block process so that at the end of the 120 days, I had the confidence necessary to go out and execute. And so that's the approach that I use. Now, during that process, there were times when things were not going well. You know, I was getting feedback every day, and sometimes it was not good. And so the physical aspect of it also, you have to have the ability to be physically fit. If you're going to take on a significant challenge in your life, you have to be mentally and physically tough to be able to get through it. And that's one of the traits that I talk about. When I have a chance to talk to people, I say, hey, you have to be physically fit and mentally tough to go out into the world today, especially now. And the reason for that is sort of like nature. Growing up on a farm, you saw it. If you were weak when you were born as a little pig or a little calf or goat, your chances of surviving were not good unless you got a little help to get through it. So in other words, nature, if you're weak, won't let you survive. So would mean that since we're a little better than nature, we like to help people. That means that the people that need the help need to develop those skills to be able to overcome those challenges. And one of them is mental toughness. Well, what does it mean? It means, for me, this is my definition. Mental toughness means a few things. First one is it means doing the things you must do when you don't feel like it. That's first. Number two, it means self-control in difficult situations. In other words, controlling those emotions. You know how many times I wanted to go and smack someone and say, hey, you're out of place again. You can't do that. You just got to be able to take that criticism and the spirit is given and take ownership of what you need to fix. The next one applies to law enforcement. That is exercising authority under control. Now, I saw that as a commanding officer of a fighter squadron. I could manipulate the award system if I wanted to. If I didn't like someone, I could say, well, I like his performance is good, but this other person is a little better. And so you can manipulate the system, but you have to resist that with your mental toughness and discipline, because exercising strength under control doesn't allow you to do that. The next one is I had to become more comfortable being uncomfortable. I walked in a situation where I may be the first. And so I had to go in this environment and feel confident and not comfortable, but confident in that position. And that was a most important aspect of what I had a chance to do. And the last one is as you're dealing with doing the things you must do when you don't feel like controlling your emotions, exercising strength under control, becoming more comfortable, being uncomfortable, you had to have a positive and engaging attitude as you're dealing with all of that. So that's my definition of mental toughness. And every one of those bullets, I had some lesson from it that that gave me that momentum and that mental toughness necessary to get through it.